Welcome everyone to my first Flying Spiles newsletter. We've kindly got Nikki here with us. Now, Nikki Mcphee is a speech therapist, and you can find her under Nikki Mcphee speechtherapist.co.uk. She's worked for over 18 years with children and teenagers all over Scotland. She's a specialist in the Johansson IAS provider, which is about when you have problems processing audio processing problems is probably the better way to say it. And she's also a Makaton signing teacher. Now, I went onto that website yesterday and I learned that this sign here is collaboration. And this is what we're doing. We're collaborating when speech therapy and oral hygiene collaborate. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Nikki a couple of questions to help us understand how we can be clearer behind our masks. So first of all, why can't we hear so well when people wear masks, Nikki?
Well, first of all, thank you, Fiona, for asking me to join you today. It's true, there are lots of people who've suddenly discovered that by wearing a mask, they can't hear anymore. And it's really because it's a bit of a myth that talking is as important as it is, because actually only 7% roughly of what we say is transferred via speech itself. The rest of it is actually non-verbal communication. So it's the tone of your voice, the way your face moves. And of course, by wearing a mask, we've not only wiped out your lips, but we've also taken out half of your face, which is where an awful lot of expression takes place and adds meaning. And I was also just going to touch on this, Fiona. There's a thing called the McGurk effect. So you can Google this, it's on YouTube. And the McGurk effect basically demonstrates that there's actually a bit of interaction between what you hear and what you say. And those patterns merge and change to almost make like a kind of third perception. So it means that we all lip read, whether we have a hearing loss or a processing difficulty to some extent. So of course we've lost that skill. So that's why we're all struggling a little bit with wearing a mask.
So can I just say that's the McGurk, did you say?
McGurk, M-C-G-U-R-K, McGurk effect. There's some great videos on that, yeah. And as speech therapy students, we kind of have to watch that to prove that things like David Beckham doesn't have a clear beginning and end to it. There's a little thing that happens in the middle of that word that makes your B into a D. Yeah, so that definitely impacts on us, and that's why masks are pretty horrible. Plus the fact that you're quite conscious sometimes of wearing them, and that affects your communication as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So you maybe get a little bit shyer behind your mask, which seems a bit weird.
Yeah, I think some people do. Some people haven't. Some people have loved it because it's made them a little bit more anonymous, particularly if you're an introvert. But if you're an extrovert, it's obviously been quite difficult. And if you're on the receiving end of it, as I say, it's quite hard. You realise you've lost your eyes to listen with. And if you have a hearing loss as well, that's even more of a problem, because there is some restriction on the sound transmission as well. Not a lot, but it could be enough for people with a hearing loss to lose that as well. Yeah.
Excellent. So then how can we speak clearly under our mask instead of being the British abroad and talking loudly? What can we do?
Yeah, I mean, I think we do all resort to that. I suppose there's a few things you can do. First of all is just to be mindful of background noise. And this isn't always possible because you might have met somebody in Aldi, but background noise is this constant kind of hum, and we usually can tune it out. But if you can't tune it out, or if you're really working hard to listen, that becomes a bit of a bother. So the first thing is, can you turn off the radio? Can you step away from the speaker? That's one of the things or turn the engine off in the car, although that tends to happen now for eco reasons, doesn't it? The second thing I would say is to try and get face to face with somebody so that you can see as much of their face as possible, and be on the same level as them. So if you're standing, let them stand. If you're sitting, generally a little bit easier if the other person is sitting as well, because you need to make that eye contact. And we have to remember we still have eye contact when we're wearing a mask. So that's two things you can do. I think as well, we can talk a wee bit louder. I don't think we need to go for the whole patronising, a British person abroad type thing, but we can speak a little bit louder. And the other thing probably that's maybe a little bit more important is just to pause a little bit in between what you're saying. So instead of delivering, and I'm really guilty of this, quite fast banter, you kind of want to say something and wait a little bit and kind of see if you can gauge the person digesting that before you give out the next bit of information. That's really useful. I also think that you must add in more gesture, possibly. You're going to need to move your hands a little bit more to reassure people. So you can add in, there are different types of gestures. If you're listening to somebody, there's a thing called kind of a timely one, where you just kind of nod your head and go, aha, kind of in a sequence. Or you might, even when you're talking, I'm quite bad at this, you kind of go with the beat to what you're saying. And that helps people follow you. You can also do kind of descriptive gestures. So, the fish that I caught was this big, or it was over there. So gestures really help. And finally, I think don't be afraid. If you have misunderstood, do say to somebody, I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Okay, don't feel bad about it. Communication is actually quite messy. We think it goes really smoothly, but actually we check for clarification all the time. So I would really promote those kind of key things, really.
Excellent. And in my newsletter, I'm talking about breathing through your nose, because obviously mouth breathing really affects your oral health, and I can imagine it will affect your speech as well. So just flinging in a third question that I didn't tell you about, but I presume it affects the way you speak too. So I can imagine that when you're communicating, nasal breathing is far better than trying to breathe and speak at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk on an out breath. So we kind of take the air in, and then we talk on this lovely continuous flow of air. So actually we generate quite a lot of water vapor, and I think people forget that we generate quite a lot of saliva throughout the day. So what you may find is your mask does get it will be absorbing moisture. And so therefore, if you're using a cloth one, absolutely need to wash it regularly. And if you're using disposable ones, as bad as it is for the environment, you do need to dispose of them on a regular basis, because they will hold moisture.
Yeah.
Somebody's asked me about clear masks before. Do you want me to say anything about those?
No, we were talking about those because I'd been on some dementia training, and we were talking about whether if it was clearer, it would be easier. But
yeah, the Royal College of Speech Therapists have obviously been really keen to have access to a clear mask, because many of us, not myself, but we're working on hospital wards with people with swallowing difficulties, and lots of people have been intubated and have got voice difficulties post-COVID. So we're kind of really at the front line for many of my colleagues. We haven't found a mask that the Royal College are particularly happy with, and the main reason is back to this water vapor. And that is that it steams up quite often your mask. So it's a really good way of knowing exactly how much water is in our breathing, but it can steam it up. Yeah. So again, you have to be careful that if you've got that mask on, if it steams up, that person may not be able to see you.
Yeah.
So
and how are you going to wipe it and everything?
And then if you're going to wipe it, you've then got the hygiene issues around catching it, binning it, washing your hands and coming back. So you've got to weigh up the pros and cons as to how you get that conversation going. I think if you are working in a setting where you've got to do lots of work with dementia patients, I don't know whether I use a lot of videoing with my children. I obviously cannot show them how to make speech sounds with my mask off. So I video myself doing that beforehand and show the video on a mobile phone or on an iPad. I think that could be done with instructions for elderly patients or people who are struggling, so that they can watch it first and then you can repeat it with the mask on. I think that's a really good technique. And if you can keep those 2 meters apart, and use a screen, that's another option to try and keep things safe. But steaming up of masks is a bit of an issue. So it'd be interesting to know how people are getting on with that.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, great to chat to you, Nikki. Thank you for all your top tips, and we'll carry on collaborating.
We will. Well, thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.